my grandfather kept a ledger. It was a green canvas, bound accounting book 8 inches by 11, the kind you cannot find at office supply stores anymore. The columns were printed in faint blue ink, and he had filled them in pencil. Every transaction he had ever made running his plumbing supply warehouse in East Point, Georgia, from 1961 through 1988. When he died, the ledger came to my father, who put it on the shelf in the living room between two books he had never read, where it sat for my entire childhood as a kind of monument to a man who believed that every number had to balance. My name is Simone Tate. I am 24 years old. And the reason I am telling you about that ledger is because 18 months ago, the night my mother called me a financial burden at my grandmother's dining room table in front of 7 relatives, she had no idea that I had already opened a yellow legal pad and begun doing the math on what she and my father had actually taken from me. She had no idea the math was going to change everything. Welcome back. This channel tells quiet stories about people who hold their ground without raising their voice. If you are new here, subscribe before we go any further, because the detail that changes this story does not come at the beginning. It arrives slowly, the way death does. Drop a comment and tell me if anyone in your family has ever made you feel like a tenant in your own life. Let me take you to the house first. The house is on Aniwaki Drive in Douglasville, Georgia, about 30 minutes west of Atlanta on a clear morning, 45 when the interstate is doing what the interstate in Atlanta does. White colonial revival, black shutters, a magnolia tree in the front yard that my father planted the spring my parents moved in, 1999. He used to tell guests at dinner parties that he had planted it himself, that he had dug the hole by hand, that the tree was about patience. He said patience was a Tate family value. The house has 4 bedrooms. I want you to understand the geography of those 4 bedrooms because it matters to this story more than any address. The primary bedroom belonged to my parents, Gerald and Renata Tate. My father sold commercial HVAC systems for a company based in Smyrna. My mother ran the administrative side of a small orthodontics practice in Marietta for 12 years, then transitioned to office management for a dermatology group in 2019. Together, on paper, their income in a normal year ran somewhere around $140,000. Comfortable by any measure, not extravagant. The second bedroom was a guest room that served as my mother's home office 3 days a week, with a daybed against one wall for the 2 or 3 times a year. Someone actually visited. The third bedroom, the one at the front of the house, south-facing with a big double window that caught the light all morning, belonged to my brother, Marcus. The fourth bedroom at the back, north-facing, looking out over the neighbor's concrete driveway, and a utility shed was mine. I want to be precise about this. The back bedroom was not smaller than Marcus's. They were identical in dimension. The difference was the window. Marcus's window faced the magnolia tree and the yard. Mine faced a utility shed and a strip of concrete, where the neighbors parked their second car. I grew up staring at that shed. After a while, I stopped staring at it, which was its own kind of small injury. Marcus Tate is 6 years older than me. He is 30 years old now. By the time I was in high school, Marcus had a title for himself. He called himself a consultant, then a founder, then an entrepreneur, in that order. The actual sequence of his ventures, as I understood them growing up, went something like this. In 2018, he incorporated something called Tate Meridian Consulting, LLC, through the Georgia Secretary of State's online portal. The stated purpose was management consulting for small businesses. I know this because the registration is a public record, and I would later look it up myself on a Wednesday afternoon at my own desk in the same building where the institution that funded Marcus's dreams had its main office. Tate Meridian Consulting was, as best I could determine from the outside, a vehicle for Marcus to bill occasional small contracts to clients who needed spreadsheets and strategic plans. In 2019, he billed a total of 3 clients. In 2020, 2. in 2021. The LLC was administratively dissolved by the Georgia Secretary of State in February 2023 for failure to file its annual registration. That detail matters. Later, stay with me. What Marcus did in parallel with consulting from 2020 onward was launch a series of what my mother called projects. There was an e-commerce store selling fitness supplements through a platform called Shopify. There was a print-on-demand t-shirt brand called Meridian Standard. There was a real estate wholesale operation he ran with a partner named Deshawn, who drove down from Kennesaw twice a month to use our dining room table as a conference room. None of these produced income that I could observe. All of them produced expense. The supplements needed inventory. The t-shirt brand needed design software, a laptop upgrade, and a brand identity consultation. The wholesale operation needed marketing materials, a website, a business phone line, and several weekend trips to different Georgia counties to walk properties with Deshawn. My father called all of this investing in Marcus. My mother called it supporting a builder. I called it watching a 30-year-old man turn our house into his office, while I studied for my accounting exams at a folding table in my back bedroom and looked at a utility shed. None of this was hidden. It was explained. My mother had a phrase for it. When I was 17 and asked why Marcus's food and phone and gas were still covered by the household while he ran businesses that lost money, she told me that some people were made to build and some people were made to be employees, and that both things were necessary and valuable, and that I was clearly going to be excellent at the second one. She said it without cruelty. She said it like a career counselor reading from an assessment result. That was the first time I heard the word provisional used about me. She did not say my situation was provisional. She said Marcus is in a provisional phase where he needs support. She said it as though what she was describing was a condition that applied to Marcus and not to the underlying structure of how our family allocated resources. I was 17. I filed the word. I did not know then that I would eventually open the yellow legal pad and find that word again in my own handwriting and understand for the first time what it had actually been describing. I need to tell you about the ledger one more time before I tell you about the credit union. When I was 12, I asked my grandfather, Grandpa Earl, to show me how the ledger worked. We sat at his kitchen table in East Point, and he opened it to the middle and showed me a page from 1974. Every entry in pencil, date, description, amount in, amount out, running balance. He told me that the running balance was the only number that mattered. He said you could tell yourself any story you wanted about the individual transactions, but the running balance did not care about stories. He died when I was 14. The ledger went to my father. My father put it on the shelf between two books he never read, and there it stayed undisturbed while his own running balance was quietly running in a direction Grandpa Earl would not have recognized. I did not know that yet. I started at Peachtree Community Credit Union on Monday, the 9th of September 2024. My title was Mortgage Review Analyst, junior grade. Starting salary, $46,200 annually. It was my first full-time salary position. I had finished my accounting degree at Georgia State in May, walking across a stage in the gymnasium while my parents sat in the bleachers and my grandmother Coretta sat between them with a cardboard fan she had brought from her church, because the gymnasium did not have adequate air conditioning. After the ceremony, my mother hugged me in the parking lot. She told me she was proud of me. She told me I had worked hard and it had paid off. She said it the way you say something you have been planning to say for months. My father handed me an envelope in the car on the way to dinner. Inside the envelope was a printed document, 2 pages, single space, titled Household Financial Framework and Contribution Structure. It was formatted like a lease agreement. It had section headers. Section 1 was titled Background and Rationale. Section 2 was titled Monthly Contribution Schedule. Section 3 was titled Review and Adjustment Process. My contribution was $920 a month. Begin date, the 1st of October 2024. review date, the 1st of October, 2025. My father said, and I am giving you the exact words because I wrote them down that same night. You are a working professional now, Simone. This is what adults in a household do. Your contribution covers your share of utilities, groceries, and the general maintenance of the space. It is very fair. My mother did not say anything. She looked out the window. I read the document in the back seat. I looked at the section titled Review and Adjustment Process. Under that section, in bullet point 3, it said the monthly contribution was provisional and subject to upward revision based on changes in income or household costs. There was that word again. I said I would sign it. I asked for a copy. My father said it was not the kind of thing you signed. It was just an understanding. I said I understood. I said I would still like a copy for my own files. My mother turned to look at me for the first time since we had gotten in the car. She said, Simone, don't be strange about this. I smiled. I took the document. I did not smile because I was comfortable. I smiled because I had just graduated with an accounting degree, and I had read enough balance sheets to know that a one-sided document with a review and adjustment clause and no defined end date was not a household understanding. It was a financial instrument. The next week, I went to an Office Depot on Veterans Memorial Highway and bought a yellow legal pad, a package of red pens, and a set of manila folders. I wrote the date on the first page of the legal pad. I wrote the heading household contribution record. I drew 2 columns, payment date and amount. I labeled the first folder household, 2024 through 2025. My mother saw the folder in my room 2 days later. She asked me what it was. I told her it was my filing system. She gave me a look that I have spent a year trying to accurately describe. It was somewhere between amusement and something that might have been worry. She said, You're such an accountant already. She was right. She just did not understand how right she was. On the 1st of October 2024, I sent the first $920 payment by Zelle. Memo line, October contribution, per H household framework. I printed the confirmation and filed it in the manila folder. I noted the date and amount in the first row of the yellow legal pad. My mother did not hand me a signed receipt. I asked for one. She wrote me a note on a piece of loose leaf paper in green ink. It said, received from Simone, $920. October housing contribution, signed Renata Tate. It was dated. I photographed it and filed the original. That was payment 1 of 26. I want to be precise, $920 times 14 months equals $12,880 exactly. I did not know on the 1st of October that 14 months was the number. I would not know that until much later. But the math was always going to come out the same, regardless of when I ran it. Pay close attention for the next part. This is where the story becomes something other than a family disagreement about money. I want to tell you about my coworker, Priya Nair, before I tell you about the record search. Priya had been at Peachtree Community Credit Union for 3 years when I arrived. She was 27, originally from Alpharetta, the daughter of 2 software engineers who had made very clear to her from childhood that the family finances were a family affair. She would never be asked to carry. She had student loans. She had a modest apartment in Decatur. She did not have parents who handed her a household contribution framework at her graduation dinner, but she understood it. She understood it because she had watched her own grandmother navigate a situation not entirely unlike mine, involving an uncle who moved through the family home like a welcome guest, while the women in the household quietly arranged the furniture around him. Priya had a way of listening to a problem that did not involve suggesting a solution. She would sit very still and let you finish, and then she would either say something useful or she would say nothing. And then nothing was always the right call. She sat across from me in the break room. On my 3rd week at the credit union, I was eating a sandwich and she was eating leftover rice from a container she had brought from home. I told her about the household contribution framework. I showed her the yellow legal pad. She looked at it for about 10 seconds. She looked at the columns, the dates, the amounts. She looked at the household 2024 through 2025 folder label. She said something I will carry for the rest of my life. She said, Simone, the person who keeps records in the family, is the person who loves the truth more than the peace. She went back to her rice. I did not say anything. I filed what she had said. In the same place, I filed everything important. Somewhere behind my sternum, quiet, available when needed. 3 weeks later, I understood what she had meant with a precision I could not have anticipated in the break room. If you have ever sat in a building all day and learned something in that building, almost by accident, that changed the way you understood your own house. You know exactly what I am about to describe. This is the part I need you to stay with me for. It was a Thursday in late October 2024. I had been at the credit union 6 weeks. My role in mortgage review involved pulling property records from county databases to verify ownership chains and lien positions before loan documents went to underwriting. It was methodical work. You learned very quickly that property records were public, organized, and indifferent to the emotional circumstances of any particular address. On that Thursday, I was cross referencing a set of properties in Douglas County for a refinancing application that had come through with an incomplete lien search. Douglas County is where Douglasville sits. Douglasville is where my parents' house sits. The Fulton County property records are on one system. The Douglas County records are on a parallel system. Same structure. While I had the Douglas County portal open for the application I was processing, a thought arrived that I had not sent for. It arrived the way certain thoughts arrive, sideways and quiet, barely announcing itself. I want to be clear about what I did next and what I did not do. I did not access any internal credit union system. I did not look up any account at my institution. I did not query any database that required employee credentials beyond what was publicly available. I opened a new browser tab. I went to the Douglas County Superior Court Clerk's online deed and lien search. It is a public website, no login, available to anyone with an internet connection and the address they want to search. I typed in my parents' address on Aniwaki Drive. 3 recorded instruments appeared. The first was the original purchase deed, recorded the 2nd of June 1999, when Gerald and Renata Tate bought the house. I already knew that. The second was a mortgage deed of trust, recorded in 2003 when they refinanced. I knew that in a general way, the way, things about your parents' finances that have been mentioned in passing for years without details. The third instrument was something I did not know. It was a deed of trust securing a home equity loan. Recorded the 8th of March, 2021. Lender, Peachtree Community Credit Union. Principal amount, $74,000. I read the line 3 times. I closed the browser tab. I sat for a moment at my desk. My coworker, 2 seats down, was on a phone call. The printer at the end of the room was running a job. None of that was reaching me. The institution where I worked, the institution whose logo was on my badge, the institution that had been sending me direct deposit confirmations every 2 weeks since September. My parents had a $74,000 home equity loan with this institution, originated 3.5 years ago. I thought about what I knew about home equity, loan rates from 2021. I thought about what I processed daily in mortgage review. A $74,000 loan at prevailing rates in early 2021 would carry a monthly payment, depending on the term and structure, somewhere between $550 and $700. Their main mortgage on a house of that size and age in Douglas County. bought in 1999 and refinanced in 2003, would be running somewhere around 900 to 1,000 a month at this point in the amortization, maybe more if they had ever done a cash out on the refi. I did the back of envelope math mortgage at roughly $950, equity loan at roughly $620. Total minimum housing obligation, $1,570 a month. My contribution, $920. That was not a household contribution. That was 58% of their minimum monthly housing cost. I opened the yellow legal pad that evening at my kitchen desk, the small desk in my back bedroom that faced the window that faced the utility shed. I wrote the date. I wrote the lender name. I wrote the principal. I wrote the recording date. I wrote March 2021 and circled it. March 2021 was the month Marcus launched Tate Meridian Consulting's rebranding. I knew this because he had sent a group text to the family with a link to his new website. I remember my mother replying in that thread with a string of enthusiastic responses. I did not draw a line between those two facts that night. I filed them on the same page of the legal pad and let them sit adjacent to each other. The way you let two numbers sit in adjacent columns before you add them. The adding would come later. I made every payment on time through November, December, January, February. I collected every receipt. My mother's notes in green ink filed in the manila folder, documented as having been paid, dated, signed. My father occasionally asked if everything was going well at the credit union. I told him it was. I was learning more than I expected. He did not ask what I was learning. I did not tell him. Subscribe if you want to hear the rest of this carefully, because I am about to tell you about the dinner and about what I understood the night before it. And those two things need to be held together, or the ending does not make sense. In early March 2025, I began cross-checking the Georgia Secretary of State Business Search database. As part of a vendor due diligence routine, my supervisor, a man named Wallace Osei, had asked me to build into our intake process. The idea was to flag any borrower entity that was in administrative dissolution before we ran their documents through full underwriting review. Wallace was precise about this in a way I had come to appreciate enormously. He said, "Simone, a dissolved entity cannot hold a valid lien. You want to know that on day 1, not day 40. I was building the search routine. I was testing it against sample entity. On a Tuesday afternoon, I thought of Tate Meridian Consulting, LLC. I was not processing an application that involved it. I was running a test. I typed the name into the Secretary of State's business search. The record came back in 4 seconds. Entity name, Tate Meridian Consulting, LLC. Entity, type limited liability company. Status, administratively dissolved. Date of dissolution, the 14th of February 2023. Reason, failure to file annual registration. Date of formation, the 12th of March 2020. I sat with this for a moment. Marcus had formed Tate Meridian Consulting, LLC in March 2020. My parents had taken out a $74,000 home equity loan in March 2021, 12 months later. The LLC had dissolved for failure to file its annual registration in February 2023, approximately 2 years after the loan was originated. None of these facts proved anything by themselves. I wrote all 3 dates on the yellow legal pad in a column with small gaps between them, the way an accountant sets up a timeline before she draws the line from cause to effect. The line would eventually draw itself. I need to tell you about the night before the birthday dinner, because that night is what made everything that happened at the table the following evening, the last night I ever had dinner in my parents' house. Grandma Coretta turned 82 on the 19th of April, 2025. She lives in a senior independent living community in College Park. Her full name is Coretta Ann Tate, N.E. Whitfield. She was married to my grandfather Earl for 41 years. She is a small composed woman who has an opinion about everything and shares it with almost no one. She taught middle school social studies for 27 years. She retains the posture of someone who has spent decades at a chalkboard. My mother planned the dinner. It was to be held at Grandma Coretta's place in College Park, in the common dining room she reserved for family occasions. The guest list was 9 people: Gerald and Renata Tate, Marcus, my grandmother's sister, Aunt Josephine Tate, and her husband, Uncle Hank, my father's cousin, Nathaniel Tate, who drove up from Macon, Grandma Coretta herself, my father's work colleague and longtime family friend, Darnell Patterson, who had known Grandma Coretta for 30 years, and me. The night before the dinner, I was at my desk. I had been at the credit union for 7 months. I had been paying $920 a month for 6 months. Total paid $5,520. I was looking at the yellow legal pad with the column of 3 dates, and I was not thinking about anything in particular. I was doing the kind of thinking you do when you let your mind rest on a problem without trying to solve it. And I thought about LinkedIn. Marcus had a LinkedIn profile. He kept it more current than he kept most things. I had looked at it once in the previous year. Briefly, the way you look at a sibling's social media with mild curiosity and no expectation of learning anything important. I opened it again that night on my laptop at my desk, facing the window that faced the utility shed, which was dark at 9 in the evening. Marcus had listed Tate Meridian Consulting LLC as his primary work experience from March 2020 through December 2022. Under the role description, he had written founder and principal consultant, provided strategic advisory services to small and mid-sized businesses in the greater Atlanta area, oversaw brand development and growth strategy for multiple client portfolios. None of that was new information. What was new, or what I had not previously noticed, was a short post he had published on the 4th of June, 2021. It was visible in the activity section of his profile. The post reads, "Grateful for the family that believed in Tate Meridian from day one and helped make this growth possible. Couldn't build without that foundation. More coming soon." The 4th of June, 2021, 3 months after my parents had taken out the $74,000 home equity loan, he had received something. He had acknowledged it publicly without naming it. He had used the word foundation. I looked at the post for a long time. Then I opened the yellow legal pad. I wrote the date of the post. I wrote the phrase "helped make this growth possible" and underlined it. I drew a line from that phrase to the date, the 8th of March, 2021. I drew a line from that date to the amount $74,000. I drew a box around all 3 items. I did not cry. I sat at my desk and looked out at the utility shed for about 4 minutes. Then I made a list of everything I was going to bring to a folder, and I went to sleep at 11:45. The dinner was at 6 p.m. on Saturday, the 19th of April, 2025. I arrived at 5:58. I was the first of the non-resident guests to arrive. Grandma Coretta opened her door herself. She was wearing a dark blue dress I recognized from my grandfather's retirement party in 1988, which I only know from a photograph on her dresser. But she had told me once the story of that dress, and it was impossible to forget. She looked at me the way she always looked at me when we were briefly alone together, steady, measuring, with an attention that had nothing quick about it. She said, "You look tired." I said, "I am fine, Grandma." She said, "I know you are fine." I said, "You looked tired." She stepped back and let me in. That exchange, if you have ever had someone see through your composure so simply and completely that you almost lost it right there in the doorway, you know what I felt in that moment? I did not lose it. I set my back down, smoothed the front of my dress, and helped her set out the water glasses for the table. The other guests arrived between 6 and 6:30. Marcus came in at 6:12, having driven from an apartment in Midtown where he had been living for 4 months with a girlfriend named Imani, whose last name my mother had mentioned to me exactly once and could not remember when I asked again 2 months later. He hugged our grandmother, shook hands with Uncle Hank, and took the chair at the end of the table, the chair that put him to Grandma Corretta's right. He had always taken that chair. No one assigned it. It was the way things had organized themselves in our family, and no one had ever examined the organization. Dinner was served at 6:45. My mother had arranged for the kitchen staff to make Grandma Coretta's preferred dishes: baked chicken, colored greens, macaroni and cheese, cornbread from scratch. The kitchen had done a reasonable job. Grandma Creta ate with the careful appreciation of someone who knows the difference between cooking done with love and cooking done with competence, and has the grace to thank both equally. The table was warm. Nathaniel from Macon was telling a long story about his youngest grandson's baseball tournament that everyone was following with genuine interest. Darnell Patterson was telling my father something about a football game. Aunt Josephine was asking my mother about her work at the dermatology practice. I was eating my chicken. I was watching the table the way I had learned to watch balance sheets, looking for the line item that did not belong, listening for the number that broke the pattern. I had sent Marcus a text 3 weeks before the dinner. I had thought about the wording for a long time. I had composed it and deleted it twice. The final version said, Marcus, I've been paying $920 a month to the household since October. Can you tell me what it is going toward? I want to make sure I understand the arrangement. He read it. The read receipt arrived 7 minutes after I sent it. He did not respond for 4 days. When he did respond, the reply was one sentence: that is between you and mom and dad, not me. I screenshotted his reply. I added it to the folder. That was 3 weeks before the dinner. It was sitting in the folder in my bag under my chair when Aunt Josephine asked my mother conversationally how things were going with Simone now that she was working full time. The table did not change temperature noticeably. My mother smiled the smile she used when a question opened a door she had been waiting in front of. She said, Simone is doing well. She is learning a lot. She is contributing to the household, which is wonderful. Adults contribute. That is what you do. Aunt Josephine nodded warmly and said, that is right. That is the right way. I continued eating. Then my mother looked at me. She looked at me the way you look at someone when what you are about to say has been composed and is ready to be delivered. She said, although Simone did send Marcus a text a few weeks ago asking him to explain where her money was going, as if we owe her an audit, the table shifted, not dramatically. The way a room shifts when one conversation ends and everyone becomes aware that a different conversation has started. I looked at my plate. I said evenly that I had simply asked a question about how the contribution was structured. My mother said, you ask Marcus, not me, not your father. You asked Marcus as if he was involved. Darnell Patterson looked at his napkin. Uncle Hank reached for the cornbread with careful deliberateness. I said again very evenly that I had wanted to understand the arrangement. My mother put her fork down. She folded her hands on the table. She was not going to slam a hand on any surface. That was not how my mother operated. My mother was a former office manager and a current administrative director. She used governance mechanisms. She used the formal meeting. She used the public forum. She said in a clear, carrying voice, $920 a month to live in a home your father and I have maintained for 26 years, and you want to audit us? Simone, do you have any idea what you sound like? The table went still. I want to describe the specific quality of that stillness. It was not the stillness of shock. Shock has a quick intake of breath. This was the stillness of people who had been at family tables long enough to recognize when a sentence had been prepared in advance and waited for an audience. Nathaniel from Macon looked at his plate. Aunt Josephine's hand stopped moving above the green beans dish. Darnell Patterson looked at my father, who was looking at the tablecloth. Grandma Coretta, at the head of the table, was looking at me, not at my mother, at me. And across the table, Marcus, 30 years old, living in Midtown. His consulting LLC dissolved. His LinkedIn post about family foundations, still publicly visible, let the very corner of his expression move in a direction that was not quite a smile and was not quite anything else. He reached for his water glass. He did not say anything. I looked at my plate. I said, "Mom, we can talk about this another time." My mother said, "I am not embarrassed to talk about it now." "Are you embarrassed?" My grandmother said, quietly, "Renata, just that one word." My mother's name in a voice that meant something specific and did not need elaboration. My mother looked at the end of the table. My grandmother did not say anything else. She returned her attention to her plate, but the word had done its work. I finished my dinner. When the cake came out, I sang with the table. I kissed my grandmother at the end of the evening and told her the chicken had been wonderful. I helped carry plates to the kitchen. I said goodbye to everyone with appropriate warmth. I drove home 45 minutes back to Douglasville with the radio off and both hands on the wheel. I cried once on the inside lane of Interstate 285, and it was not about my mother. It was about my grandfather's ledger, which had been sitting on a shelf between two unread books in my parents' living room for 11 years, and how he had told me when I was 12 that the running balance was the only number that mattered, and how I had been letting someone else run my balance without my knowledge. I did not cry at the table. I did not cry in the parking lot. I did not cry in front of anyone. I cried alone on the interstate in the dark, going 64 miles an hour, and then I was done. I drove the rest of the way home in silence. That night, I sat at my desk and opened the yellow legal pad to the page with the 3 circle dates. I wrote the date of the dinner. I wrote my mother's exact words. I wrote the name of every person who had been at the table. Then I started making a list of what I was going to put in a folder. The following morning was a Sunday. I got up at 6:45. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table, not at my desk, because I wanted to be in a different room for this. I had a specific list of what needed to happen in the next 2 weeks, and I wanted to look at it from somewhere that did not have a utility shed in the window. The list was not a revenge plan. I want to be precise about this. The list was an accounting exercise. I was going to determine with the precision that my training and my job had given me exactly what had happened. And then I was going to decide what to do with that determination. Item 1 on the list: pull the full Douglas County deed and lien record and note every recorded instrument on my parents' property with dates and amounts. Item 2, pull the Georgia Secretary of State record for Tate Meridian Consulting LLC and print it. Item 3, find Marcus's LinkedIn post from the 4th of June, 2021. Screenshot it. Item 4, calculate the total I had paid since October 2024 and project the total through the remaining months of the current arrangement. Item 5, get a written receipt for every payment I had not yet received one for. That last item was the one I had been careless about. My mother had given me green ink notes for October and November. After that, I had been lax about asking. I had Zelle confirmations. I had the dates and amounts in the yellow legal pad, but I wanted the signed receipts. That Sunday, I asked my mother for receipts for December, January, February, and March. I brought the legal pad to the kitchen table and asked her to sign each one. She looked at the legal pad the way she had looked at the household 2024 through 2025 folder, labeled 6 months earlier. The same expression, amusement edged with something not quite nameable. She signed each receipt. She used her green pen. She dated them. She initialed each one. She said, I feel like I should be issuing you a W negative too. I said, that is all right, Mom. She laughed. She put the pen down. She went back to her coffee. I filed the receipts that afternoon. 6 payments with signed documentation, 2 more Zelle. Only I had the Zelle screenshots for all of them. The legal pad had every date. The running total through May 2025 was $7,360. $920 times 8 months equals $7,360 exactly. I went to the Douglas County Clerk's online portal that Sunday evening. I pulled the full property record for my parents' address. The 3 instruments I already knew about were there. What I noticed this time, now that I had the full record in front of me and was looking at it as a mortgage review analyst rather than as a surprised 24-year-old at a work desk, was the structure of the home equity loan. The instrument was a deed of trust, which in Georgia secures a non-purchase loan against the property. The lender was Peachtree Community Credit Union. Principal $74,000. Recorded the 8th of March, 2021. The type of instrument was labeled in the deed of trust itself as a home equity loan, not a line of credit. That distinction mattered to me professionally and personally. A home equity loan is a fixed disbursement. The entire principal is advance at closing. It is not a revolving line. My parents had received $74,000 in a single lump sum in early March 2021. Marcus had posted about family support in June 2021. Meridian Consulting LLC had been formed in March 2020 and dissolved in February 2023. I did the arithmetic on the posted size section of the legal pad, $74,000 over the months between March 2021 and February 2023. Roughly 23 months of business runway works out to approximately $3,217 a month in implicit support before the enterprise dissolved. My contribution of $920 a month over 14 months would come to $12,880, $23,920. The number sat on the page in my red pen, steady and indifferent. The way numbers are. That is roughly what I was going to pay to live in the back bedroom that faced the utility shed. That is the amount my parents were going to collect from me, while my father's running HVAC salary and my mother's administrative director salary continued to exist. That is the money they were recouping the cost of having funded Marcus's ventures through a home equity loan they had taken out 3 years before they told me adults contribute. I did not make a sound when I arrived at this conclusion. I wrote it down. I put the legal pad in the manila folder. I put the folder in the bottom drawer of my desk. Then I went to bed. I need to tell you about the next 3 weeks because they are the part where I made a deliberate choice about how to carry what I knew. I kept paying. April's payment went through on time. $920. Zelle memo line, April contribution. Per H household framework, I filed the Zelle screenshot. I asked for the signed receipt. My mother handed me the green ink note without commenting. I kept going to work. I processed loan files. I ran lien searches. I sat 2 desks away from Priya Nair and ate lunch with her in the break room 3 times a week. I did not tell Priya what I was doing. I did not tell anyone. Priya asked me once in the break room in the 2nd week of May whether everything was okay at home. She asked it the way she asked everything, directly, without pressure, with a full willingness to accept a non-answer. I said everything was okay. She said, you've been running a lot of voluntary database searches after hours. I said I was building out a skill set. She looked at me for 2 seconds. She said, okay. She went back to her rice. She did not ask again. That was one of the things I most valued about Priya Nair. She knew the difference between someone who needed to talk and someone who needed to be left alone to finish something. She left me alone to finish it. The item I had not yet found was the one that connected the loan to the specific disbursement. I knew the loan existed. I knew the amount. I knew the date. What I did not have and could not get from public records alone was evidence of what the money had been used for. The public record would tell me the lien. It would not tell me the check register. I did not need the check register. As I worked through this problem on the yellow legal pad over several evenings, I came to understand that I did not actually need to prove where the money went. I needed only to demonstrate the timeline and let the people at the table construct their own understanding. The timeline was this: a home equity loan originated in March 2021, a business post about family support in June 2021, a business dissolved in February 2023, a daughter assigned a monthly contribution in September 2024, a contribution amount that corresponded closely to the carrying costs of a $74,000 debt. Anyone who had ever worked in financial services could assemble those facts into a complete picture. And people I was going to put that timeline in front of had one thing in common. They were all members of the family that had benefited from the arrangement being invisible. I was going to make it visible. I want to drop a comment prompt here that I mean sincerely, not as a formula. If you've ever been the person in your family who kept records while everyone else kept explanations, leave a comment and tell me what your version of the yellow legal pad looked like. I want to know. I read every one. In the third week of May, I made an appointment. I did not call it a family meeting. I sent a text to my mother that said, I would like to sit down with you and Dad and go over some things. It would be helpful to have Marcus there too. Can we do Sunday, May 25th after lunch? My mother replied in 20 minutes. She said, of course, sweetheart. We can do 1 o'clock. What do you want to talk about? I said household finances contributions and how we go forward. She said, okay, I'll have Marcus come. Glad you want to talk. I noted the time I sent the text and the time she responded. I filed the screenshot. The night before the meeting, I sat at my desk and went through the folder one more time. I organized the documents in the order I intended to lay them out. I numbered the pages in the upper right corner with my red pen. Page 1, the printed Zillow rental comps I had pulled for comparable one-bedroom rentals in Douglasville and surrounding zip codes. 5 listings. Average rent, $745 per month. The house I lived in charged $920. Page 2. The yellow legal pad contribution record, photographed with every payment date and amount, and the running total of $12,880 in projected contributions over 14 months. Page 3. The 6 signed green ink receipts from my mother, photographed and printed. Page 4, 2 Zelle confirmation screenshots for the months without signed receipts. Page 5, the Douglas County property record showing the Peachtree Community Credit Union deed of trust. $74,000 recorded the 8th of March, 2021. Page 6. The Georgia Secretary of State record for Tate Meridian Consulting LLC, showing administrative dissolution the 14th of February 2023. Page 7, the screenshot of Marcus's LinkedIn post from the 4th of June 2021. Page 8, the screenshot of Marcus's text reply to me from 3 weeks before the birthday dinner. That is between you and Mom and Dad, not me. I read through all 8 pages. I was sitting at my desk. The window was behind me. I had turned my chair so my back was to the utility shed. I closed the folder. I went to sleep at 10:30. This is the part of the story where I have to tell you exactly what happened in that living room on Sunday, May 25th, 2025, and I need to tell it carefully because the thing that made it what it was not the documents. The documents were the structure. The thing that made it what it was is what I did not do. I arrived in the living room at 1 p.m. on the dot. My parents were already seated, my father in his usual chair, my mother on the couch. Marcus arrived at 1:12. He sat in the armchair closest to the door. I sat on the couch across from my parents. I set the folder on the cushion next to me. My mother started. She said she was glad I wanted to talk. She said she knew things had been tense since the birthday dinner. She said that she had not meant to embarrass me at the table. She used the word tone, as in my tone may have been off. That is not an apology. I want to be precise. Acknowledging a tone is not acknowledging a fact. I let her finish. My father said he thought we all needed to clear the air. I nodded. I picked up the folder. I opened it to page 1. I placed it face up on the coffee table between us. I said, I want to walk through some information and then ask a few questions. My mother looked at the paper. She looked at the Zillow comps. She said, what is this? I said, those are current rental comps for this area. 1-bedroom units. The average is $745. I am paying $920. My father looked at the paper. I placed page 2 on top. I said, that is my contribution record. Every payment, every date, the running total, 40 months at $920 is $12,880. That is what I will have paid when the current arrangement ends in November. My mother opened her mouth. I continued before she reached a word. I placed page 3 on top, the 6 signed receipts, copied and arranged in a grid. I said, those are the signed receipts, your handwriting, your initials. Each one says received from Simone, $920, housing contribution. Marcus was looking at his phone. He looked up. I placed page 4, the Zelle confirmations. I said, these are the months without paper receipts. The Zelle confirmations have the date, amount, and memo line. My father set down his coffee cup. I placed page 5 on top, the property record. I said that is the Douglas County property record for this house. The deed of trust at the bottom, dated the 8th of March. 2021 is a home equity loan with Peachtree Community Credit Union. $74,000. The room went quiet in a way that was different from the other quiet. The other quiet had been conversational. This was the quiet of a number landing. My mother said, how did you get that? I said, it is a public record. The clerk's portal is free. Anyone can search it. She did not say anything else. I placed page 6, the Secretary of State record. I said, that is Tate Meridian Consulting, LLC, formed March 2020, dissolved February 2023. Dissolution reason, failure to file annual registration. Marcus put his phone face down on the arm of the chair. I said, Marcus, I am not accusing you of anything. I am documenting a timeline. I placed page 7, the LinkedIn post. I said, this is a LinkedIn post from the 4th of June, 2021. That is 3 months after the home equity loan was recorded. It says, quote, grateful for the family that believed in Tate Meridian from day one and helped make this growth possible. My father looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at the paper. I said, I am not drawing a conclusion for you. I am setting out a timeline. You can draw your own. I placed page 8. Marcus's text reply, I said, and this is the response I received when I asked Marcus 3 weeks before Grandma Coretta's birthday to help me understand what my contribution was going toward. The room was very still. My mother's hands were in her lap. She was not looking at the folder anymore. She was looking at the middle distance between the coffee table and the window. My father was looking at his hands. Marcus was looking at page 7, the LinkedIn post, in a way that suggested he had forgotten it existed. I closed the folder. I picked it up. I held it in my lap. I said very quietly, I have been paying $920 a month to live in this house. The closest rental comparison I can find is $745. I earn $46,200 a year. My contribution comes to approximately 24% of my gross annual income. I am not angry. I am telling you what the numbers say. Then I waited. The hardest thing about a room that has just been told the truth is that the room needs a moment to reorganize itself around the truth. I have learned this at work. I have learned it from Wallace Ossey, who processes difficult loan reviews the same way. Lay out the facts, state the implication once, and then stop talking. If you stop talking, the other person eventually has to speak. And what they say in that silence is the most honest thing they will say in the entire conversation. My mother said after a long pause, we were struggling. 3 words. After 8 months of household contribution, frameworks, and green ink receipts, and the word provisional and the word audit, and 9 people at a table being told, I was ungrateful. She said 3 words, and they were the first true thing she had said to me in 7 months. She said, after your father lost the Kennesaw contract, we were down $40,000 that year. We had the house. We had the loan. Marcus needed the support. You were employed. You were stable. We thought it was temporary. There was that word again, provisional. I said, I understand. I said, I would have helped if you had asked me directly. I said, I needed to be asked, not invoiced. My father rubbed his face with one hand. He looked at the folder in my lap. He said, we should have told you what it was for. Marcus said nothing. He did not say anything for the entire rest of the conversation. He sat in the armchair closest to the door and he looked at the coffee table and he did not open his mouth. I told them 3 things. 1, I would continue paying through the end of the agreed arrangement. Through November 2025, I would not leave them with a gap, $920 every month on time. Through November, that was my commitment and I would keep it. 2, I would not be renewing the arrangement. In November, I would begin the process of finding my own place. When I left, I would leave with a written release stating the arrangement had been fulfilled in full and that no further financial obligation existed between me and my parents regarding housing. 3, the conversation at Grandma Coretta's birthday dinner in front of 7 people, including Darnell Patterson and Nathaniel from Macon, needed to be addressed. Not to me privately, to Grandma Coretta. My grandmother had said one word at that table to intervene, and she deserved an acknowledgement of what she had witnessed. My mother said, that is fair. My father said, I'll talk to Marcus. I did not ask what talking to Marcus was going to produce. I gathered the folder. I stood up. My mother reached for my arm. As I passed the couch, she said, Simone, I am sorry. 2 words more than my mother had ever said to me about money in 24 years. I looked at her hand on my arm. I looked at her face. I said, I know. I walked out of the living room. I walked through the kitchen. I looked for one moment at the shelf in the living room where my grandfather's green ledger sat between 2 books my father had never read. I did not take it. I left. I drove to Priya's apartment. She lived in a 2nd floor unit in a converted bungalow in Decatur. 5 minutes from the Decatur MARTA station, the kind of building with a landlord who fixed things within 48 hours because he lived on the ground floor. She opened the door before I knocked because I had texted from the parking lot. I sat on her couch. She sat in the chair across from me. She did not say anything for about 2 minutes. Then I told her everything. She listened the way she always listened, without interrupting, without reframing, without advising. When I finished, she sat quietly for another moment. Then she said, "Did it land the way you needed it to?" I thought about it. I said, "Yes." She said, "Good." She got up and went to her kitchen and made tea without asking. She brought 2 mugs back and set one in front of me and sat back down. She said, "The person who keeps records in a family is the person who loves the truth more than the peace." She said it the same way she had said it the first time in the break room over rice 8 months earlier. I said, "You told me that already." She said, "I know. I wanted you to hear it again now." I drank my tea. The windows were open. It was late May in Georgia, which means the air outside was already warm and heavy with the beginning of summer. I could hear mockingbird somewhere near the parking lot. I stayed for 2 hours. I did not cry. I had done my crying on Interstate 285 a month earlier. That Sunday night was the last night I slept in the back bedroom with the window that faced the utility shed. I will tell you what happened in the months after, the way I learned it, in the order I learned it, keeping the amounts exact because the amounts are the only part that is not a matter of interpretation. I made every remaining payment through November 2025 as promised. 6 more payments of $920 each. Total additional payments, $5,520. Running total for the full 14 months, $12,880. My parents paid off the Peachtree Community Credit Union Home Equity Loan by early 2026, as I later confirmed from the Douglas County Property Records portal, where a release of lien was recorded in February of that year. The payoff reflected a combination of my father's renewed sales territory, which had recovered after a restructured arrangement with his Smyrna employer, and the sale of what had been the guest room, furniture, and other reductions I can only infer from the outside. Marcus moved out of his Midtown apartment in July 2025. Imani had ended the relationship in June. He relocated to Savannah, where he has been working as an operations coordinator for a logistics company, at a salary I do not know and have not asked about. His LinkedIn profile has been updated. Tate Meridian Consulting is not listed anymore. The post from the 4th of June 2021 is still visible in his activity, though I suspect it will eventually be deleted. I did not call my mother for 3 weeks after the meeting in the living room. She did not call me. My father sent a text on the 4th of June 2025, which happened to be the 4-year anniversary of Marcus's post about family foundations, though I doubt my father knew that. The text said, "I hope work is going well. Your grandfather would have been proud of how you handled Sunday." I read that text 12 times over 4 days. On the 14th of June, I replied, "Thank you, Dad. I appreciate that." We have spoken on the phone twice since then, both times about practical things, his retirement account, a question about a credit union service I could help him navigate, my mother's health insurance switching. We have not talked about the folder or the meeting or the green ledger on the shelf. I have not needed to. On the 31st of October 2025, I made the final $920 payment. Memo line, November contribution, final month per H household framework, fulfilled in full. My mother sent a text that same day. It said, "Received. Thank you for keeping your word." I mean that I kept the text. I did not reply. On the 1st of December 2025, Grandma Coretta called me from her landline in College Park. The brown rotary style telephone she has had since she and my grandfather moved into their first apartment in East Point in 1963. She still has the same phone. I have held the receiver of that phone since I was small enough to need both hands for it. The call was 4 minutes and 30 seconds long. She said she had wanted to call sooner. She said she had not known what to say for a while, and she had been thinking about the right thing. She said she had seen what happened at the birthday dinner, and she had said only one word. And she wanted me to know that she had wished many times since then that she had said more. She said, Simone, your grandfather kept that ledger because he wanted to know the truth of his own life. He said, a man who doesn't look at his numbers is a man who is hoping reality will be polite. She paused. She said, you looked at yours. That took something. I had been sitting on the edge of my bed when the call started. By the end of that sentence, I was sitting on the floor with my back against the bed frame in the back bedroom in the house on Aniwaki Drive, looking at the window that looked at the utility shed. I said, thank you, Grandma. She said, come visit me soon. Come before the holidays. I said, I will. She said, don't forget your tea when you come. You always forget your tea. I laughed. It surprised me when it came out. She made a small, satisfied sound that meant she had been trying for that laugh and was glad it arrived. We said goodbye. I sat on the floor for a few minutes after the call ended. The utility shed was visible through the window. I had been looking at it for so many years that it had stopped reading as a limitation and become simply part of the view. That is what happens when you adapt to something for long enough. You stop registering it as wrong. I thought about the word provisional. My mother had used it in 2017 to describe Marcus's situation. She had meant it as a temporary condition. What she had not said, but what I now understood completely, was that in the logic of our household, Marcus's situations were always provisional and always resolved in his favor. My situation was also provisional. The difference was that mine was provisional in a different direction. What my mother had never understood was that provisional runs both ways. The arrangement she had handed me as a household framework was provisional from my side too. I let go of it in November. The week after Grandma Coretta's call, I went looking for an apartment. Subscribe if you want to hear this part. I mean, the ending is the only part of the story I am entirely happy with. I found a one-bedroom unit on Saturday, the 6th of December, 2025, in Avondale Estates, a small incorporated city just inside the perimeter, 11 minutes from the credit union, 7 minutes from Pria's building indicator. The building was a 1960s brick garden-style complex recently renovated. Large windows in the living room facing east, a galley kitchen with clean appliances, a bedroom with a single window that faced a courtyard garden with a large oak tree. The landlord had told me was close to 80 years old. The window faced a garden. I noticed that first rent $840 a month, $132 less than my contribution to my parents. The lease was for 12 months. I signed it on the 13th of December, 2025. On the 14th of December, 2025, I gave my parents 30 days written notice that I would vacate the house on Aniwaki Drive by the 15th of January. My mother read the notice at the kitchen table. She did not comment on the format. She set it down. She asked if I needed help moving. I said I had it covered. Priya helped me move on the Saturday of Martin Luther King weekend, the 17th of January, 2026. We rented a small trailer. We made 2 trips. The second trip took 2 hours, including a stop at a Vietnamese sandwich shop on Memorial Drive that Priya had been telling me about for 4 months. I carried the yellow legal pad. I carried the folder. I carried my grandfather's paperback copy of a book about the Georgia Appalachian Trail that he had given my father, who had given it to me without ceremony when I was 16. I carried the childhood earrings my grandmother had given me. I did not carry the green canvas ledger. I had not taken it on the day of the living room meeting, and I did not take it when I left the house for the last time. It belongs to my father. It sits on his shelf. He can read it or not read it. The numbers in it will not change based on whether he opens it. But I took the method. I want to tell you about the first night in the Avondale Estates apartment because it is the ending of the story that, I mean, when I said I am entirely happy with the ending. The furniture was sparse. I had a mattress, a desk, 2 chairs, and a set of bookshelves Priya had given me from a storage unit she had been clearing out. The living room was mostly empty. The bedroom had the mattress and the desk and one lamp. I sat at the desk that first night. The window was to my right. The courtyard garden outside was dark, but I knew the oak tree was out there. I had already thought about what it was going to look like in the morning with the east light coming through the leaves. I opened a new yellow legal pad. I wrote the date at the top, Saturday, the 17th of January, 2026. I wrote the heading, Simon's household record. I drew 2 columns. I wrote the first entry, date, the 17th of January 2026, amount $840. Notes, first month's rent, Avondale Estates. Paid to landlord. Received signed lease as receipt. I filed the signed lease in a new Manila folder, which I labeled Avondale 2026. There is something about starting a ledger for the first time that belongs entirely to you. My grandfather had started his in 1961. Every transaction in pencil, running balance. The only number that matters. I started mine in pen. Wallace Osei put me up for senior mortgage review analyst in February 2026. The effective date was the 1st of March, pending the completion of a certification course I had been enrolled in since January. The certification was for the Georgia Residential Mortgage Loan Originator Compliance Program. It was a 40-hour course. I finished it in 3 weeks. Salary change $46,200 to $54,800. I called Priya when the offer letter came through. She said, obviously. I said, obviously is generous. She said, no, it isn't. She was right. My parents listed the house on Aniwiki Drive in March 2026. The listing came after my father's company announced a territory consolidation that eliminated his position. He was offered a severance package and declined to contest it. With the home equity loan paid off and my father's employment situation changed, they decided to downsize. The listing price was $312,000. I know this because Aniwiki Drive is in Douglas County, and Douglas County property records are public, and I still know how to use the portal. The house sold in April 2026. The magnolia tree was visible in the listing photos. The listing photographer had positioned the shot to include it. It looked healthy. My father had planted it in 1999 and told people at dinner parties that patience was a Tate family value. The back bedroom was listed as a second bedroom on the property description. It was described as north-facing with a window view of the adjacent property. I thought about that description for a moment when I read it. Adjacent property, that is the precise and neutral language for a utility shed and a concrete parking strip. It is a language of public records, which describe only what is there, not what the person in the room was missing by looking at it every day. I am not sentimental about the house. I want to be honest with you about that because I think you might expect me to be, but there is a difference between missing a place and missing the version of yourself who lived there without questioning it. I miss the version of myself who did not know the running balance. I miss her a little. She did not lie awake trying to reconcile the numbers. She just slept, but she was not building anything. The person I am building now keeps a ledger. She knows what she is paying for. She knows what she is worth in the market. She knows how to pull a public record and read it without anyone's permission. If you've ever been the person in your family who finally stopped letting the balance run unexamined, you know what I am talking about. Leave a comment and tell me your number, not the dollar amount necessarily. Whatever the number was that changed your understanding. I drove to College Park on the second Sunday of March 2026 to have tea with Grandma Coretta. She made it the way she always made it, loose leaf. In a pot she had had since the 1970s, steeped exactly 4 minutes. She had a timer on the kitchen counter. She did not estimate. She timed it. We sat at her table. The pot was between us. She poured without asking if I was ready, because she always assumed I was ready. She asked about the new apartment. I described it: the brick building, the east windows, the galley kitchen, the oak tree in the courtyard. She listened with her head tilted slightly and her hands around her mug. She said Earl would have liked the sound of that. I said, I know. She said, he always said the view from your window tells you what the owner of the house thinks of you. I thought about that for a moment. I said, then I am in the right place. She smiled. She refilled my mug. We sat for another hour. We talked about her social studies unit on the Reconstruction era that she still thought about 40 years after she had last taught it. We talked about the mockingbird that had been living in the oak tree outside her window for 3 springs in a row. We talked about whether the tea was right. This time was slightly too strong. She said it was exactly right. I agreed. When I left, she walked me to the door the way she always did, with the particular care of someone who has learned that goodbyes are worth doing properly. She held my hands in both of hers at the door. She is small, and her hands are precise and warm. She said, come back when you can. I said, I'll come next month. She said, bring your legal pad. I want to see what you are building. I laughed. She knew about the legal pad. I had told her about it on the phone in December, and she had asked 3 careful questions about the column headers and had not said anything critical or approving until she had all 3 answers. I said, I'll bring it. She said, good. Your grandfather kept his ledger for 27 years. He never missed a month. I walked to my car. The street in College Park was quiet in the late afternoon way of southern residential streets in early spring, which have a specific quality of light and stillness that is hard to describe to someone who has not been in it. I drove home. I turned on the radio for the first time in a while. I want to close by telling you what happened to the Green Ledger. I do not know for certain. My parents moved into a 2-bedroom townhouse rental in Douglasville after the Aniwaki Drive house sold. I have not been inside it. I know its address because my father texted it to me in April, and I noted it on the current page of my legal pad. Whether the ledger made the move, I cannot say. My father is not a man who throws things away. He is a man who puts things on shelves and leaves them there for decades, hoping that proximity to a good object will eventually transfer its values. I hope the ledger made the move. I hope he opens it someday. But I did not need to take it. I learned what he was teaching before I was old enough to read every column. My grandfather sat with me at his kitchen table when I was 12 and showed me a page from 1974 and told me the running balance was the only number that mattered. For 11 years after that, I let someone else run mine. For the last 18 months, I have been running it myself. The yellow legal pad is on the desk in the Avondale Estates apartment, next to the window that faces the courtyard with the 80-year-old oak tree. The columns are clean. The running balance is current. Every month, I write the date and the amount and a 2-word memo line. The memo line is the same every month for the first time in my adult life. because the thing I am paying for has not changed and does not need to be explained. The memo line says, "My home." I did not take revenge. I did not need to. I took the ledger method, and I left the back bedroom on Aniwaki Drive is someone else's view now. Someone else is looking at that utility shed. I hope they ask sooner than I did what the window says about what the owner of the house thinks of them. The answer, once you find it, is the beginning of everything. My name is Simone Tate. I am 24 years old. I balance my drawer every shift. Thank you for being here. If this story reached you somewhere true, subscribe. There are more like it. They are all quiet, and they all have receipts.